Yeah, all right, we're recording now. Thank you so much, Sarah, for coming in. Would you like to, describe who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, and why you're doing it? Most importantly, because I particularly found what you're doing to be extremely important work in the day and age that we live in.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Trumble. I am the founder of the Job Applicant Perspective, which is my user reviews for job ads, like kind of like an anonymous Google reviews for job ads across the U.S. I think that the labor market requires regulation of its platforms, and I think job seekers represent the most logical solution to such a situation, because in the end, I think really all online marketplaces benefit from engagement, not solutions. They drive engagement, that's what they do. But all users go to the platforms for solutions, not engagement necessarily. And as a result, one of the reasons that the online labor market is so clogged with noise is partly because one half of the market doesn't have access to user reviews to sort of complain about the things that don't warn each other about, like bad products on the market, so to speak. Products being job ads in this case, but still.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I mean, in essence, it's basically a one-sided market, isn't it? Like, you've got these multinational corporations, or even if they're not multinational corporations, they're basically getting their a lion's share of the pick with respect to who they would or would not like to choose. But at the same time, the potential candidates, they don't have that kind of a say in it because of social media and like LinkedIn and all of these platforms. They're basically inflating the number of candidates, the employer.
100%.
Yeah. Please, what are your thoughts on that? If you'd like to add
No, I
something.
agree completely. I think that there's a variety of things that, like most markets, when they went online, they democratized more. Like there used to be in the US, at least, Siskel and Ebert were these movie critics who used to tell everybody what the best movies to go see were. And then when it went in online, you get IMDb and Letterboxd and Rotten Tomatoes and all that sort of thing. And that happened across the board, except for the labor market. The labor market sort of digitized deference instead of democratizing. And I
Yeah.
really don't think that in an online space that works. I see that in the online space, I think the internet made the world into a snowstorm, kind of. And in the middle of a snowstorm, you don't call the corporate office to ask them where to go on the roads. You talk to drivers on the roads to get insight.
Yeah,
There's a lot
absolutely.
of changing things happening.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, that's kind of where my brain is. And I agree with you. It's not just about necessarily big bad actors. Like there's all sorts of small bad actors too that you could warn each other. And then there's the other side of that too, is that it's not always just bad actors. Sometimes when job seekers are applying to roles and they're getting ghosted all the time, it's not always that the company is a bad actor. Sometimes I think of it more like my goal long term is for the platform to turn into sort of a Google Maps of the hiring process. And in that regard, like a red on the road, it's not evil. It's just a traffic jam. They have enough resumes. They don't need any more. And that's
Yeah.
information that allows you to make informed choices. I think there's just way too much information asymmetry where the job seeker side of the market is walking into a black box. And that's entirely not useful for either side of the market. It's kind of where my brain is.
Absolutely. So there are two things that caught my attention. One phrase that you used was digitized deference, and I think that is so. I mean, it's very characteristic of the job market. And I do agree that maybe there's nothing evil or sinister at play from the other side, from the hiring side, but would you say that as an emergent, on an emergent sort of scale, it ends up being that? I mean,
Yeah, I think
potentially,
that it
yeah,
doesn't really matter at a certain point whether or not I intended to hit you with my car or whether I did, like, unintentionally do it. I'm still hitting you with my car. And, like, I think of it more like, kind of like, if you don't tell a teenager to clean up their room, after a while, dirt will accumulate in the room, not because they're intending to have a dirty room, but because they're not required to clean it up. And if it was more
yeah,
profitable to not clean it up than you would. So I think of the job market a lot like electronic Disney, where they wouldn't really have to sell. They don't have to please the kids in order to sell tickets to the parents, you know, and they don't. And then as a result, also it becomes a problem because it's a downward spiral of quality because you're not standing out anymore. So I don't know how much, if you're familiar with like the Nash equilibriums, like the non-converging equilibrium scenario, but that's the way I see this playing out, is that it's an arms race. You know, job seekers optimize for visibility, employers optimize for filtering, I'm not sure if you're staying on the piece, but it gets worse and worse. There's no way for it to converge without better understanding, you know?
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. You know, and you know, I would like to get, so this is something that I found really, and I admire you for doing this. Like, you've brought game theory in to deal with the labor market dynamics, which I want to get into. But just before that, would you say that this sort of a spiral is basically has become a vicious feeding cycle where the job market is optimizing for filtering out, like you said, but what they end up filtering out are the ones that are actually just playing that game of, you know, me trying to increase my visibility and them trying to filter it out. So it's not really about competence anymore. It's just about playing this game of cat and mouse.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the problem here is with these systems like ATS system, they talk about this being an efficiency system. Absolutely not. Like, if they're talking about 10%, like the top 10% of candidates, what I hear you saying is that's a 90% friction rate that you're adding into the market unnecessarily. Why would you do that? Like, that doesn't sound logical at all. I really think people need to think about the fact that filtering and matching are not the same thing. Those are two different things. It's a category error to mistake those two. But I think my theory on this, and again, this is a complex dynamic system, so there's a lot of different actors with a lot of different reasons. But it's more like, don't talk, at least in the US, don't talk about your hiring process. It makes you look unprofessional. Because I'm a professional, I don't even think about my hiring process because, you know, I'm professional, but I do have to think about it. So I start thinking about hiring from the employer's point of view. That's what I do. And so I almost perform a category error in my brain in terms of the thing. And so they're not really thinking it through, because when I look at this data from all these like Harvard and MIT and like really smart places, brilliant, smart people doing smart things all over the place, but then they get to two-sided market economics and they're like 1 + 1 = 3. Like, what? No, it doesn't. Like, and they're doing all sorts of other things, but the basic addition there is not happening. It's not really 1 + 1 = 3. But you know what I mean? That sort of.
Yeah, I do.
So yeah, that I got it off the track, but yeah, no, I agree with you. It's fascinating. It's almost like a psychology problem, half of it too, of category. But I think it's this old, for me, the problem here when the market moved online is almost more serious than the opaque algorithms or the white labeled people. It's that category error that we all were trained into, and that the stewards of the market, to some degree, because they're so professional, because they were so successful in the system, they are the ones that can't see it the most because of all those things, you know?
Yeah, but what do you think is driving this sort of oblivion that they're not able to recognize that what they've created as an ecosystem, like the job, you know, the entire thing about hiring someone, it's become a game rather than an actual process which ends up hiring the right kind of people?
I don't know. So, because in the end, yeah, it's like you were saying, an ATS system, especially with that level of, like, where you have to repeat so much, that's filtering for desperation. That's not filtering for talent. Like, that's not how that works at all, especially when you have an opaque algorithm, a white labeled situation. Nobody knows what they're doing, and they're playing signaling games where there's no memory of where you've been before. They're just throwing spaghetti at the wall, you know? And that is, like, I don't know, to be honest, I don't know all of it. And I wonder if it's, like, I circle around to different sides of this. There was a guy, Bonhoeffer, back in the day. Bonhoeffer had that collapse of perspectives, talked about it. It was the guy from Germany. during the Nazi stuff. And I worry about that. I think about the category errors, and then I also just think about almost like professional pride, maybe. I've been doing this for so long, and I don't want to be that wrong. And I mean, not to like, I think sometimes when I've gotten really defensive in my own life, when I've made mistakes and stuff, a lot of the times when I can't admit a mistake, it's not necessarily because I didn't know I made it. It's because I don't feel good anymore if I made it. You know, like I get really defensive, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think, you know, the entire thing about corporate is that it's built on these relatively, well, not relatively, but yeah, unfalsifiable claims that this is the way that things should work. This is what is expected of like a nascent candidate or a nascent employee, and this is how they should respond to what we ask of them in the interview or in the hiring process. And I think they don't want to sort of re-examine that they might be wrong.
I agree. I actually like, there's an inability to flip perspectives, an inability to flip reference frames that is like wild to me. I don't understand it fully. And again, I'm coming from my own frame of reference as well. I call this, again, I don't know. I call this sometimes like frame monopoly. Like, you know, when you're a kid, I think you're born with one reference frame and you want the toy or the teddy bear, whatever it is. And then you learn to share, and most people can pick up 3, 4, 5 of those things, you know? Yeah. And we both interact, and if I get you upset, then I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm so sorry. I probably shouldn't have hit you with my car. I can see how that would really upset you that I've hit you with my car. Let me take you to the hospital, you know? But when you start getting in a certain level of status or power or authority, you start being able to put down reference frames after a while. And I think we train each other to do it unintentionally, like, oh, that's a girly thing, or people like us don't go to that side of town. You know, it's a way that you signal that you're part of an in-group, in that it's not that you yourself, like, I'm not, like sometimes, depending on the groups themselves, like in the US, there's like colonialism kind of stuff, but like, you're not, I'm not rich, I'm just not poor, you know? I'm trying to be not poor, or I'm trying to be not a woman. And when you're on the bottom end of the hierarchy scenarios, you're just who you are. But when you're in the higher level, you're who you're not. I'm not that type of person, I'm not that type of person. And you sort of just have this one reference frame. I don't know, I think of it a little bit like, almost like empathy, I think isn't really, I don't think it's a soft skill. I think it's a information integrity. And in the past, it's been a signal for superiority to not be requiring yourself to have empathy for people outside of your demographic. But these days, I think it's almost a trick that people use to sort of isolate you, because I can't really stop any more information from coming to you. But if I can convince you not to listen to somebody else because you're cooler than that, you're more important than that, then what really happens is that I can still stop you from listening. And that isolates you informationally from insight. So I think of it as, I think they've been almost like an ego blackmail. For them to listen to job seekers is for them to, I don't know for sure. Again, I circle around a lot of ideas, and there's so many actors in this space that it's hard to say. And I mean, also to be fair, I'm on my side of the table. It's easy for me to see the whole thing on my side, and I don't have that perspective too. So I don't know. Yeah.
So, okay, so because you said that, let's say we brought in someone from hiring, like someone at the top of the chain, and or someone at the middle of the chain who knows enough about of like the rung ladder that is beneath them and that is above them. They would probably, I mean, I'm just imagining like this imaginary voice. What would they say? They would say, no, you don't understand. We're taking care of these factors that you don't know about, and they're you know, without these factors, they wouldn't be able to hire the kind of people that we genuinely want. But I feel like it's like I mean, to be honest, I'm on the side of the nascent candidate, so probably it's a biased view, but what I think is going on is they're basically they're being dogmatic with respect to the factors that they're trying to preserve, and they're not taking in information as it comes. They're not seeing that, wow, that we do have a situation at our hand, and they're probably at the center of it. I mean, if not at the center of it, they're like a huge player with the other half being the candidates who are trying to optimize for visibility, and they're sort of feeding into each other, not realizing what they've created.
I think that's definitely it. Like, so there was, I do think that's it. I think it's you when you're in the middle, you're sort of in that short term, you're in a linear scenario where you're looking backwards and forwards. You're not. So the easiest people I find to engage with this topic on are usually at the top and at the bottom of this sphere. These guys have the most wide open view, and these guys do too, because they get to and they have to. And these people in the middle have to care about the people here and the people here, kind of. But I agree with you that that's probably dogmatic, and also you're trying to stay within the rules almost, you know. But it almost gets, and I don't know, it vibes. I listen to this woman called the Knitting Cult Lady on TikTok, but it has almost a high control religion kind of vibe. Not really, but kind of, in that I see a lot of these engagements where whenever I'm reading about cults and stuff, people are talking about how you can't flip reference frames. And this is where I talk about this frame monopoly, is that I find it very difficult to flip the reference frame. But even Harvard had a study that came out a couple years ago, Hidden Workers, Untapped Talent. And I wrote about this in some of my work, but they talked about 27.4 million Americans that were actively hidden from hiring by standard talent acquisition practices. And they framed it in terms of a skills mismatch and how awful it was, like that, you know, how inconvenient it was for employers. And I'm just like flabbergasted, because the data is fine to me. I can't speak to that. I don't have the training to have done the data, but I very much trust that. But it's fascinating because 27.4 million Americans, and it was still framed in terms of how wasteful it was for employers to have access to good talent. Like, that's 27 million people actively, like, plus all of their dependents and all of their like family, friends, all of the communities, the tax base. How does that affect them to go for years without access to steady work? And like, but it's almost like the frame monopoly of only being able to see hiring from the employer's point of perspectives. They can't even conceive of engaging with it from another reference frame that somebody would profit on this. But they really, why wouldn't they? Because I think when hiring moved from the newspapers to online is when job seekers moved from being customers in the market to products of the market, which also make them, you know, unpaid revenue drivers for the market. And so so a ghost job in the newspaper, which would have lost the newspaper money for doing that because they cared about clean signal, online is profitable, you know. And like that, why wouldn't they do it? It's not why is there ghost jobs, it's why wouldn't there be ghost jobs. Have you seen how many funny cat videos there are? Like, they're great, but you know, when it comes to jobs, that's something else, you know. So.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, the way that you said it, right? Like, as and when the job advertisements moved from the newspaper to online, the companies had basically the lion's share of the pick. Like, okay, we can choose whoever we want. Okay, if you want to do it in like, you know, X dollars an hour, we've got someone from the other side of the world who's ready to do it at a third of the cost. So, and that sort of basically gave them the monopoly over the frame, right? Like, we can decide whoever we want, but you have absolutely no choice in it. Not just that. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Plausible deniability. As soon as you have the entire world to choose from, well, they just didn't like it because we were over here, this kind of over here. But the plausible deniability starts like writing out too of, excuse me, I apologize.
No worries.
I think there's that plausible deniability of, you know, the entire world to choose from. Oh, she's just complaining, he's just complaining kind of energy.
Yeah.
That. Sorry, keep going. You were right.
No, please.
Right. The frame of reference, when they control the conversation. I think people forget that, or at least in the US, there's 160 million people in the workforce at any given time, as far as the Bureau of Labor and Statistics estimates it. And the people who work in talent acquisition solutions, the way they classify it is HR, and that's about 1 million people. And that's HR and talent acquisition. And so you have 159 million people who are not HR, who would be the people using the job market. Like the conversation about what the job market is actively controlled by less than 5% of the people using it, you know? It's like only talking to the flat earth people. Like, you know, you're not talking to everybody. It's sometimes when I see these conversations about global warming or something, and we talk to people as if there's two sides to this. If you're really trying to represent it, you have to have 97 people here and 3 people here to have an actual representative conversation. To represent it as if there's two equal sides is to misrepresent the actual. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I mean to say that sometimes there aren't two equal sides to something. Sometimes an expert is a little bit more expert at something. Not always, but it's complex, as you well know. These things are always complex. So
I think I get that. Oh no, don't worry about that. I think I get. Sorry about that. I think I get what you're saying. Is that okay? So we've got like a very small percentage of the population actually having their say on what's going on, but the rest of it, even if they were given a chance at having any say in it, they'd say no, it's the entire system. That's how it works. You know, kind of like religion in some senses, like the Boston church thing that went down in like 2000s, right? It's oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Is that?
Yeah, no. Sorry, it is. I agree completely. It is. I was thinking about this. I had a brain blast, and I just meant to say that.
Yeah, please go on. Yeah.
I think it's like the difference between trust and trust theater to me. So, like, usually a market, like everybody kind of tends to know that an economic market runs on trust, right? You have to have trust in order to have resolution for any sort of thing. If you're buying shoes or if you're buying tickets or if you're buying whatever you're buying, some level of trust. But the talent industry cultivates trust with employers, but they don't cultivate trust with job seekers. And that is the difference, because they cultivate trust with the people who are writing the checks, but they don't cultivate trust with the people whose time and attention fuels their revenue. And as a result, the people who write the checks have a lot of trust in the talent industry, but the people whose time and attention fuels their revenue aren't required to have trust in, like, who cares if they have trust in the talent industry? This for me is more of trust theater, because it allows them, because it doesn't really matter if they cultivate trust with employers, as they need to be cultivating. It's like I said, they are Disneyland, who doesn't have to appeal to the kids in order to sell tickets to the parents. But the kids' time at Disneyland is the stuff that drives the revenue. So if employers actually want resolution in the market, they need to require the talent industry to cultivate trust with job seekers in order to get resolution. Because if they're not, then it's just trust theater. It's the appearance of trust without the actual requirement to deliver the quality of goods and services that will allow resolution in the market. If that makes sense.
It does. No, it does. Which brings me to this point that so you would be aware of this thing called wage slavery that Noam Chomsky would often talk about, right? This concept of wage slavery.
I'm familiar with Chomsky and I remember it, but could you remind me a little bit more about wage slavery?
Yeah. So it's basically, I mean, I probably can't give an academic definition, but it's been a long time since I read it. But the basic fundamental, and I might be wrong about this, is that you don't have a choice because you're a slave to your daily wages. But I mean, it's no longer daily. But in some senses, it is, because companies have the frame monopoly, and the only thing that you can do is to either fit in the system or get out of it and just die without any food on your table, right? So it is a form of wage slavery, and I think it applies more in today's day and age than it did in the newspaper advertisement era of jobs.
I agree. No,
I'm
agreeing.
Yeah. Oh no, that's fine. Don't worry. Yeah. So basically, when you say that it's only 5 to 10% of people on the candidate side that have any say in the matter, The rest of them won't be able to do it because they're just like, I need food on my table, so I have to do whatever is necessary to be employed. And the employers are like, they're so stubborn that they just will not concede to the fact that something has been going wrong. Does that make sense?
I agree completely. I think that's what's happening here. They can't conceive of a world. It's almost like they have diabetic neuropathy. They keep walking on a wounded ankle, and they're just yelling at the ankles, walk, why don't you? And it won't, but they can't conceive of the idea that they should just stop, look, and see. But I think for me, even when the academics couldn't do it, they're in the middle of studying how this works, and they still couldn't even see that 27.4, so I still saw 27.4 million people out of work, and I still saw that, yeah, of course, it's still inconvenient for employers. I agree. But also, what's the revenue stream of this ATS company? I feel like cui bono, follow the money, it's...
Yeah.
Do they profit from that? Because it sounds like maybe it's working just fine, if that's the case. I feel like that could be true. And then if you talk about job, and then first I looked at it from an unprotected consumer point of view, like the white labeling. Job seekers aren't able to see if they're looking at Greenhouse or Workday or ICIMS. And then not only that, they're not able to see, did they not get through because of a keyword? Did they not get through because of X, Y, or Z thing? And then they didn't get any feedback. They don't have any training. They don't have any of the normal things that someone would be able to get through. So they're the unprotected consumers. That's one thing. They're not able to make informed choices in the market. Already you're walking into a casino scenario. And when you're in a casino, but employers aren't the house, the house always wins. It's going to be the middleman that's going to win. But then you start talking about how job seekers are, in that case, the unpaid revenue drive. It's like a big magic claw machine. The market makes more the longer that the users that drive its value don't find the outcomes that they're looking for. That's a problem, and that's not going to end in a way that's helpful to anybody involved, including employers as well. I think that in the end, unless job seeker time is treated as currency in the market, employers, it's just going to be rent seeking. They're just going to be like magic claw energy, or slot machine. I called it like a slot machine for resumes, but realistically, I think it started out as a level of a vending machine kind of energy. Oh, human interactions are awkward. Here, if you just put your resume and there's these employers on the other side, and employers had that same energy. But in the end, Vegas didn't create vending machines. They went to slot machines after a bit, variable ratio reinforcement. Anyway, that's where my brain goes. I think there's a lot of pieces there, but I don't know why it's so hard to conceive of the idea, because I actually think it's the Occam's razor solution, is that in fact, people follow their financial incentives. If it's going to be more profitable to not solve your problems for you, I don't know, there's sort of like a profit in the pain model versus a profit in the solution model. It seems like it could be true, but they can't. I don't know what people who are so smart in so many ways, who have so much intelligence about so many things, are struggling to see something that seems very straightforward to me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, right? Because I think, okay, so let me lead with an example. So Mike Bloomberg, mayor of New York and founder of Bloomberg. Yeah. So when he was out of college and he was trying to get his first job, I think he narrated this story at one of the events at Oxford or said business school or someplace, and he said that I basically had two choices. Either I could join Goldman Sachs for I think they were paying him $14,000 a year, I think it was $14,000, which was basically enough to cover all of his expenses plus some luxury, I suppose. But he also had an interview at Solomon Brothers, and they were giving him like $9,000, which was not enough. Like he needed like $2,000 or $3,000 more to just meet his basic expenses. And yet he chose to work with Solomon Brothers, and the reason for that he gave was that Solomon Brothers were basically. He went to Goldman Sachs and he asked them, okay, what do you want me to do? He was like 23 years old at the time, and Goldman Sachs were very, very specific about and very clear about what they wanted him to do, and they just gave him like a fixed set of job responsibilities. But Solomon Brothers, I think he spoke to the number 2 guy at Solomon Brothers, and he was like, okay, look, we don't even know what you're interested in. We don't know what you're good at. So right now we're just putting you on a payroll and let's see how that works. Right. And because of that very thing, he chose to work with Solomon Brothers, and he had Solomon Brothers write him a check, like a loan of sorts, which was $2,000 or $3,000 to cover his expenses. But yet he chose to go that way because that way he would learn the most. So it's like we've abandoned this concept of apprenticeship completely, right? That you can learn on the job, and because of that, we're basically separated by this, osmosis membrane that only takes in the bits that the company finds to be, robotic in some sense. Like you just plug and play the employees. The candidates. I don't need to have to train you. So you have to meet these specifications in order to work with me. So I think it's kind of, we've lost the idea of apprenticeships. We've lost the idea that we've abandoned our belief in the fact that people will and can learn on the job, and I think everyone's basically trying to optimize on, in the landscape which is sort of made by that belief itself. So instead of saying, okay, we don't know what you're good at, but we've only seen a piece of paper that basically tells me something that you did in the past. But in reality, all of work, like 80% of work, is managed through the relationships you form, right? And how efficient, like the bottleneck of any kind of work is the relationships that you operate in at the workplace. And I think we've completely, sorry, yeah, go on, please.
No, you're not wrong. I think that's another piece of this pie here, is that we optimize for people who fit into a very specific mold. So I think these systems work really well for people, I'm going to say really well, but like when you fit a very specific mold, like, okay, I'm going to be a teacher, so I should have 4 years of school and this much of this and this much of this, But so much of human skill sets are adaptive. That's what we do as people. I'm a fine example of such a thing, and like it's so true that the hiring system as it is right now is very robotic. It's not embracing the human variability of the thing in and of itself. At least in the US it doesn't. And I don't know how it is over there, but yeah.
Yeah, no. I think what happens in the US is felt by everyone else, because most of the MNCs in India, for example, are like American major corporations, and I think US leads usually by example. So and it sort of ripples through the rest of its sort of outposts and whatnot. Okay, so my contention in that case is that we're basically, the employers and the employees, or the nascent candidates, all of us are trying to work out this situation, the sticky situation in which neither side actually is caring about the things that actually make things work, that make the employer-employee relationship start. Because if the first entity that any nascent candidate sort of encounters is a robotic system which is trying to optimize for the number of appropriate words that you used in the resume to even get a chance at being interviewed. I think that's not going to work, because you don't build a relationship that way. Does that sort of...
Yeah, I totally agree. You don't, if you're optimizing for the signal layer instead of optimizing for sharing your skills, you're already admitting, I feel like, that the signal layer is corrupted. Because it's like, I built this restaurant, and then I had to build a pharmacy next door to sell antacid for people who are using the restaurant. And then I had to hire maitre d's to show people how to order food at the restaurant. And then I had to hire people to show you the politest way to order the food, because you've seen the rise of job boards online. And then immediately at the same time, the rise of the ATS industry as well, which is a secondary thing. And then immediately the rise of career coaches and resume writers to help you optimize for your resume. And then JobScan and all these AIs to help you optimize for that as well. For me, that doesn't speak to a functioning system. That speaks to a malfunctioning system. And in the US, we still have like $50 billion spent a year with workforce solutions to help people get for this supposedly successful industry. No, it's not. That's not what success looks like. Flower markets don't have a department of flowers to help them sell flowers. That doesn't how it exists. And yet they have a much smaller carrot to entice people to buy flowers. And yet they seem to stay in business. And yet these $600 billion a year global industry requires about 50 secondary industries to prop it up, plus the U.S. Department of Labor to also prop it up. That's not success. That's like a good narrative, but I would not describe that as success. And I get it. Or like Disney World is another great example. Disney World manages to stay in business without a department of Disney World to help convince people as to how to use Disney World, so it suggests to me that that this is not a functioning industry, and it's problematic if it's not, because I think it doesn't require itself to adapt to the needs of its users, because it's only really required to adapt to the needs of its customers, employers. It's not required to adapt to the needs of job seekers. In fact, it makes more when it doesn't adapt to the needs of job seekers, because it just gets engagement. I think the profit streams they publish these fiscal year reports. They're not hard to find. And it's straightforward to me that they're profiting from engagement, but it's pretty standard. Most companies online do profit from engagement. That's not confusing. But I don't know. I think there's an implicit... Yeah, I don't know. My mind goes to a lot of different reasons as to why there goes, but I think I see it as an identity market to some degree, in a labor market skin suit kind of, where the identity is the employed person. You're employed and you're important because you're employed, And so we want to immediately distrust somebody who's unemployed. And it's not, that whenever something's identity based, people get more illogical than they would otherwise be. And I guess we're all kind of guilty of that to some degree. We have the identity, whatever our identities, however we structure it, that as soon as something challenges, and this is where I think that talent vendors play to employers with this kind of sell. Well, I'm in the same identity group as you. We're the employed people here together. You just can't trust those guys over there. And I don't know. Yeah, sorry. I go off on tangents on this thing because I think go on the circles of how do we share this. So I try to think of it in other ways too, trying to reframe the market itself, because I think of online hiring is really it's like tech Uber, but this one can't have user reviews because professionalism. I don't know, but for me, chefs that make good food, they're not afraid of their diners describing what it tastes like, whenever somebody's afraid of me describing what it tastes like, I don't think so. That sounds suspicious to me,
No, I think that's exactly it. I mean, so as you were saying that, I was just thinking about the concept of marketing, right? You've got these huge, gigantic marketing teams which are basically trying to sell your product as not what it is, but what you think people would, sorry about that. What you want people to think it is, right?
Yeah.
You want people to think of your product in a certain way. So it's not the case that you're producing genuine value for the society. You're not contributing genuinely, and therefore you have to have these, ultra sophisticated marketing teams which will market the product for you. And it's all about posture, like you said, right? It's all about posture and not about actually creating something that is of genuine value and that genuinely contributes to the society in a net positive way. And I think, and you said that the system is malfunctioning. I would contend that the system is working exactly in the way that it is intended to, which is to pose value rather than creating value. So you've got these, it's always seems funny to me, and I mean no disrespect to the people who do this job, but why would a job like resume optimization thing would exist? Why do you need that job? And does it genuinely help you feel like you're contributing to the society just by tweaking someone's resume?
I think that it's the difference between, I have a meme that I made about De Beers, instead of trying to make great diamonds, they decided that they're going to try to keep out bad girlfriends, keep bad girlfriends. So De Beers, usually they're a diamond store, right? And they make great diamonds for people to propose to their wives.
Yeah, oh, okay, got it.
So it's like they created online De Beers, but instead of creating a De Beers that was there to make great diamonds so they could propose well, they made a De Beers that was there to keep out bad wife material, and to filter out bad wife material. And so De Beers starts looking more and more like a man cave. Instead of looking like an elegant diamond store where you're going to propose with your beautiful diamond ring, it's looking like a man cave and like a grumpy man saying nobody wants to get married anymore, But the problem is De Beers. You're not trying to evaluate the concept of employment. You're trying to say that you've got bad jewelry, friends. The jewelry store's your problem. But I think that it's what you said about identity is interrelated, because I also think of the luxury purse market. If you think about a $5,000 Gucci purse, so to speak, or a $25 purse that maybe you could buy at Walmart, let's say. Really, what's the difference? I think when you buy the Gucci purse versus, they might be the same size, and a lot of times I think they're made in the same factory, sometimes too. But what you're buying is the right to feel special, the right to feel more important. I'm the type of person that has Gucci purses, not that type. And I think almost the more that you spend, the more you double down that, of course I spent this much, it's better quality, it's more important, kind of a thing. I think it becomes almost you have to, not you have to, but it becomes so attached to your identity that you've really just purchased. So I think of the online labor market as really an identity market with an unpaid labor force, job seekers, with sometimes externalities of talent matching too, but overall it's an unpaid labor force for an identity market to remind employers that they're this much more important. And again, this is in general, and this is not to say anybody in particular. The problem here is that it's sort of a spread out collective issue, a narrative issue. It's not necessarily, don't get me wrong, I think there's some straight bad actors too, but overall, not necessarily a straight bad actor. It's more of a misunderstanding of what you're looking at. But I would agree with you. I think it functions very, very well as that. But for me, you can't get away from it, is that if job seekers were a stakeholder in the online labor market, you would need user reviews, because how else does a vendor justify that they deserve to be there? And if job seekers were a product of the online labor market, you would also need user reviews, because how else do you optimize the process? And so if job seekers aren't a stakeholder and they aren't a product of the online labor market, if they're not the product, for me it's the identity is the product. The is the product. But then the other side of that for me too is, I mean, what's the difference between somebody working for Greenhouse and a job-seeking labor force? Like, both work generating revenue for the online talent industry, many times for years at a time these days, thousands of hours, years at a time, generating revenue for the online labor market, but only one of them gets a paycheck, you know? That's a problem. Like, that can't, like, because you can't have, in the US, Jacobs and Cooley from Business Insider was talking about 9 years, a guy with a master's degree looking for work, you know? And he regularly interviews people 3 years, 4 years. Harvard had that 27.4 million people that were 2 years or longer unemployed or underemployed looking for work, which for me in general, that's long-term generating revenue for an industry while not receiving a paycheck. You know, like that's a bad vibe. Like, that's not good for anybody. And it's not good for the rest of the labor force too, because that's going to suppress wages everywhere. Because I don't know, that's my vibe.
Yeah, no, okay. So I'm going to take a tangent slightly before where you ended, which is that I think people have conventionally treated the employer-employee relationship as the only platform through which value can be transacted, right? And so, but the problem is, it's not about transacting actual value, it's about transacting postured value in which you're posing, okay, this is what I'm bringing to the table. And the company is like, okay, that's good, but we're not really doing all of that stuff that you're talking about. We're just doing the kind of stuff that we sort of advertise it, but we're not really doing it. Does that make sense? Like, for example, if you take the Gucci example, yeah. It's not necessary. So, you know, a person goes out and buys this like $500-$600 purse from Gucci, and they're like, okay, yeah, I have this thing now, I'm like somehow special. But in reality, it's not, you know, like you said, the purse was probably made in the same factory as the $25 purse, right? So it's not actually the actual value transacted isn't a real thing. It's an imaginary thing. It's what you believe about the product. It's what the seller makes you believe about the product. And I think a lot of these, you know, we're in the situation where that's exactly what's happening. Like, you can, like, there were several TikToks and Instagram reels on people saying that they lied on the resume and they got the job, and then they were fired from the job like 1 or 2 weeks after.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. And maybe that kind of stuff is happening in reality. And maybe that sort of tells us how badly skewed the posturing problem has gotten. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is, this is posturing for me. This gets back to, so I agree with you. I think this identity, people get into these ego traps almost, where I'm a vendor and I'm going to sell you my services, and I want to sell them to you, Arush, because you're the special person. You're the type of person that likes this sort of thing, and I don't sell it to those type of people. I sell to people like you. And at first it sounds like flattery, and of course you're like, yeah, of course I am that sort of person, you know, I am. But what I've really kind of done is I've set you apart from other people, and at a certain point I'm like, oh, you don't want my services anymore? I thought you were this kind of person, but if you're not that kind of person, it's okay. You know, I'm just going to go sell to other people who really are that type of person. And it doesn't really matter if I sold you that, you know, you're the strong person, you're the smart person, you're the rational person. I'm just going to go sell these other rational people over here. But what I've actually kind of done is sort of wrapped your identity in the concept of your rationality, your strength, your superiority, whatever it is that I've sold you as, and I put you in a level of an ego blackmail or some sort of identity driven concept of, if you don't buy from me, then, you know, I didn't think you were soft like that, but, you know, it's your choice. It's your choice. You know, I think that you're right about the marketing is people sell you a story of who you are if you purchase my product, and that can be really powerful.
That's exactly it. So, sorry, could I just add in a point that I just thought about? Is that So there's this thing called the Dunbar number, is that the maximum number of relationships, meaningful relationships that you can have, it's limited. So like a single human being can at the most at any particular time sustain 150 relationships, and that's the peak number. It's the maximum number they can have, and I think. Like I said, it's the meaning that's associated with the relationship on which values is being transacted at. So it's not just about me purchasing a product from you. It's about how you make me feel about the product, how I would feel if I had that product and others sort of believed it, bought into the same story, which is perfectly fine because human beings are social animals. So that sort of thing is fundamentally baked into our neurochemistry, that how we want to feel, and that's how we do business with each other. But I think the problem is when that characteristic of ours as human beings gets exploited, and because they know that we or human beings are going to want this, they sort of exploit that and make it into an identity politics thing where they're able to exploit that and have profits because they were able to exploit that.
I think this happens in that very much so. I see this, I phrase this another way too, that I think that one of the ways you can tell the labor market runs without trust is a lack of empathy. And that lack of empathy is a hallmark of it, because for me, I think of empathy as almost data integrity, kind of in a way, in that in a face-to-face engagement, or even though we're far distance apart, I'll say something, and if I can see a flinch of your face or whatever, I have a nervous system reaction, and I'm just going to adjust in the moment. But when we're in an online space, especially when we're in disconnected, online spaces, lack of empathy, that it engages more and more and more. And it leads to posturing. It's how you start out. Markets optimize what they measure, not what they market, and that social media they market themselves as a connecting space, but they measure engagement. And in an online space, in a face-to-face space, if I'm a jerk all the time, you might punch me in the nose and then walk away or whatever it is, probably not that, but you know what I mean? Like this sort of thing. But in an online space, that's not going to happen. A lack of empathy creates engagement, but it creates engagement, but it doesn't create good data, because we start doing posturing, and I'm mad, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to tell you off, and you're mad, so you're going to come back and you're going to tell me off, and then we're going to get in a big hoo-ha. But that resolution of people just walking off doesn't happen in the same way. And I'm saying this in a smaller, I think this lack of empathy thing, in that in previous periods of time, to seem important, you postured, that's how you told everybody in the room that I'm important. In an online space, this doesn't go well. I think that the way that the vendors talk about job seekers is a dead giveaway, that they're not engaging with respect and engagement. You get bad data when you're engaging over long periods of spaces with lack of empathy. Because say I'm a job seeker and I didn't get the role, even if you asked, I could tell you a true thing, but why would I tell you a true thing? Because if I thought you were going to be mean to me about it, better for me to say nothing, or just be like, no, it was fine, no big deal, whatever that is. And then you're not getting good data. And if you're the HR person, and I'm asking you, I could listen to what you say, but why would I listen to what you say? Because I don't respect what you say, because you're the one who's saying it. And then nobody's getting good data. It's just becoming a performance theater, where I think that in the online spaces, that this thought that we can behave in a performance-oriented way without a little bit more very particular care and consideration leads to great bits of data drift, where we're getting bad information and people are posturing. And it's like you said about I think I'm melding my ideas right now, so I'm not sure if this, I'm slipping between one thought and another, but I do think that unless we're willing to be changed by what we hear, we can't really hear anything at all, And a lot of times in these spaces, nobody's hearing anything. There's a lot of talking, but there's no listening. And it becomes empty engagement that is just posturing upon posturing that is engaging, but it's not, it solves nobody's problems, you know?
Yeah. So I think, okay, so one of the things that I'm...
Bring it back to something important.
yeah, no, don't worry about that. I had this point, like I was thinking about this thing anyway. So you've got this posturing thing, which is being done by both sides, employers and the employees, because employees, they want, they think that they want the money to buy a kind of lifestyle that's sold to them. So it's like you've got two different things going on at the same time. Let's say you're an individual person, you see a Gucci bag and you want to buy that because there's a particular story about that. So now you need that much amount of money in your bank account to be able to buy that. So now you subscribe to this other thing which tells you that, okay, if you perform this way, we'll give you this much amount of money. And then you take that money and then you buy it from Gucci, and now you don't just want to work at any place, you want to work at what's considered the best of those things. Either you want to work at Goldman Sachs or you want to work at JP Morgan or what not. And it's like, unless and until the user, which is the job market applicant, unless and until they're like, okay, we're not going to subscribe to this thing anymore. We don't need that money to buy that Gucci bag. We're more than happy to buy this $25 bag as it serves all the functionalities that we need. Unless and until they start believing that they don't have to be dictated by stories that are made up in society. Like, it's a made up construct, right? You don't need
You're right.
$500 Gucci bag. You need, you need like a $25 bag, which you don't even need the $25 bag. Go and buy the $10 bag, and you can survive off of that. So I think it's like a system which has sold us all of these stories. Oh, you need to have a Gucci bag, and you need to work at the top sort of echelon of whatever kind of work you prefer, and you should be competitive. You should be, you should be a boss bitch or something of that sort. So these are all of these stories that make you take bad decisions that you don't have to take and it sort of causes you to change your identity from who you feel internally to what society thinks you should feel externally. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. I think, it's easy for me to like critique employers for falling for this trap of, the ATS machine to get you the right candidate, et cetera and so forth. But we all do it, like, to some degree. I mean, that sort of marketing gets thrown at everybody, and it's not like I haven't, wanted to buy the X thing or wanted to engage with it. It's so true. This marketing is so, it's very good. Like it's really true. I think that sorry, my brain, like, it's just like bubbling on this sort of concept here. Like, but it's true. It's how do you I do think, for me, I think that the rise of what's happening here in the world, so I'm going to go global here. So, like, I'm in general, is that authenticity is going to be the next big thing. So in the US, obviously, we have an audacious, I feel like we have the National Enquirer of presidents right now kind of going on, like very, but part of it is a similar thing. There's almost like the show itself. Everybody's like the next brightest, flashingest, most amazing thing. And then we have our other political party gets very almost like the dictionary. Well, we're not like those people. We're like the dictionary. There's a middle ground. The opposite of audacity doesn't have to be agreeableness. It can be authenticity, Authenticity is also, it's also eye-catching, but it's eye-catching in a different kind of a way. It's not as flashy as audacity. They're not going to say the ridiculous things. Well, they probably will still sometimes. But, like, for the most part, no. but they're not going to be as white bread, like sort of bland mashed potatoes, white rice kind of. It's not about being white, it's just about being bland. You know, sometimes people try to appeal to everybody, so they're so bland. The middle ground is more authenticity, not audacious, not whatever, it's authentic. I think that prior to this period of time, prior to the internet, and again, predictions, we don't know, who knows, but I think that performance signaled power, signaled strength, signaled importance, you know. But the internet makes performance so easy, so cheap, that it's dangerous to listen to performance anymore. What you need to do is listen to discernment. Almost like, I don't know about you, but I've bought a couple products like from Temu, not necessarily Temu, I'm not just bad mouthing Temu, but like a couple products that look nice, and then you get them and you look at the dress or you look at the thing and you're like, oh, this is not really what it looked like in the picture on the internet, you know? And you get it, and it happens enough. The performance, you're like, I can't trust performance anymore. I need something authentic. And I think, and again, I think it'll take time, but I think that's where the drive is going to be for authenticity. I think that's where there's something there to authenticity that's going to have to come, and that authenticity will lead to more of a less of a I'm going to buy the Gucci purse, I'm just going to buy the purse that suits me, you know, because I don't live out the story that I'm told to live, I live out the story that I live, you know. I come from my frame of reference. I hope so anyways, because I do think you're right that this is discernment anymore is a thing that I look for, because like I liked our recent politician, Mamdani, kind of spoke to it. He's not quite so audacious, and he's not bland. He's opinionated. He has a clear point of view, but he's not all one thing. He's just himself, you know? And it's invigorating to watch somebody be officially themselves. And I think in those moments too, it's good because you need to have a commitment to learning. Not necessarily to knowing, but to learning. Because I think anybody can be swayed in the internet age. We're all going to screw up. We're always going to make a mistake, you know. The goal isn't to pretend that you didn't make a mistake. The goal is to learn from the mistake, you know. And that's my brain. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard. Like, performance used to be something that you should listen to. Performance meant safety. Performance meant power. Performance meant I'm the type of king that could build Notre Dame, so you're safe in my country, you know? But performance doesn't mean that anymore. Performance can mean flash and show, but it's theater. It's not real. And it's a way to lose your money and to get involved with what do you call, do you have those in India? We used to have the Prince of Nigeria schemes where someone would write you and claim to be from Nigeria, and you should send me some money. Who knows where they were actually from? But like, they're these people that will sell you the world. And yes, this is our new get-rich-quick scheme, but there's never anything at the end of the scheme. Snake oil salesman, another way to put it. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen in the internet age, you know? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think. Okay, so let me sort of boil down what we've modeled so far. We've got these institutes, like Gucci could be an institute. You've got JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. All of these are institutes, and every single one of them is basically trying to sell you some of that institutional validation. So I remember watching this movie, Ford versus Ferrari, and in one of the Ford guys is sort of pitching to Henry Ford II that we should go out and participate in Le Mans in Europe, because so we should make that race car, and the race car, when it performs, people would want some of that success, right? So they're basically trying to sell their product by selling institutional validation, right? Like, okay, this particular person from this particular social circle wears a Gucci bag, and so should you, because that's what makes you like a respectable person, or someone worth swooning over. And so we've got these institutes selling us products that you give us this much amount of money, $500, and you buy our bag. And then we've got this other institution saying that if you do the work that we require you to, we'll give you those $500. So we've got this ecosystem which is basically fixated on not fixated, but rather built on using the stories you've internalized about yourself. Oh, I'm unworthy if I don't have a Gucci bag. Oh, I'm unworthy if I'm not earning $500 per, to spend on that Gucci bag. So I think, and where authenticity comes in is if you start detaching your identity from that institutional validation. Okay, I'm enough if I don't have the Gucci bag. I'm enough if I'm not earning the $500 to earn the Gucci bag. And I think because humans are social creatures who are completely fixated on the stories that society tells them about themselves. It's not even themselves telling a story to themselves. It's someone else said it to them when they were young or when they were a kid. Like, oh no, you should have like these kinds of things in your life. And they just internalize that without ever critically questioning whether or not they needed it in the first place. And that's how we end up where we are right now. It's like, okay, like just going back to the Gucci bag thing story, so unless and until there's a revolution in which people start saying, I don't need this stuff, I'm happy doing the things, I'm happy skateboarding with like a $30 or $50 skateboard, and I don't need to be working like 14 hours a day trying to do long division for someone who's, I don't know where that work is going anyway, and I don't need that Gucci bag. So unless and until we hit that sort of a revolution, I don't think this can be solved. And obviously I'm not saying that that people are not being swayed by these institutions themselves, and so maybe there should be policy on like, okay, you can't advertise plastic on your ad board and then give us something else. It's famously true for a lot of fast food chains, right? Like they just advertise these plastic burgers, but what you get in reality is not that at all. So yeah. So it's about policies on posturing. Yeah, sorry, please go on.
No, I think I wanted to say that like I do see this rise, like these two sides. There is an increase of performance culture, but then there's also a sort of breaking and decoupling from that too. I think even in the job market, as you get this thing getting worse, where the narrative of what the market is has become so decoupled from the reality of what the market actually is, that it's getting better to some degree, because not better. I mean, in that when people lose faith in the concept that the narrative is going to save them the way that it's been marketed, they stop sourcing their identity through there. I know me personally, I was pretty broke up. I was in the job market. I was one of those people who said, oh, well, you probably just need to check your resume. You probably just need to X, Y, or Z, I believed the narrative, And so until I was in the labor market, and then I was in there for a couple of years, and then I got really upset about it. And I was like, nope, there's something wrong here, because I did it scientifically. I was like, oh, there's something wrong with my resume. Clearly, I just haven't, done a resume in a while. And then I was like, well, maybe I need to hire somebody else to do it. Maybe I hired the wrong person. Well, maybe if I just get a subscription to JobScan, maybe I'll do that. Maybe if I go to these virtual interviews, maybe I'll do that. And at a certain point, a couple thousand resumes in, you're like, you know what? I have 17 years of experience. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree. Like, I make all the qualifications of a person who's supposed to be able to use this system. It doesn't work. That means I need to study the system. So, but I mean to say that I'm not if we're talking about 27.4 million people in the US alone, and that was only in the US, it was expected to be many times that across the world. I think there's a decoupling going on between the narrative that the people in the positions of status, power, and authority think is happening, and the reality of what people are actually living. And I notice it in the US, and again, we're in the middle of a political moment here, so there's that. But celebrity culture has really gone away to some degree, and I think that's part of what you're describing. Or I see a rise of even again, and I might be attributing too much, so, but K-pop Demon Hunter vibe, where people are very the authenticity vibe. That narrative is sort of a bubbling up of nothing but the truth now, nothing but the proof of what I am kind of energy. Like, it's very, this is who I am actually, and I am what I am, kind of, and I admire that. I think it helps us ground us back into where we're at, because the performance that the internet allows, the way that you can just be anything, nobody will know because they don't get to see you. It is, especially with AI rising, I did not know that you could, they were talking to somebody how they were going to use celebrity faces, and you could like put yourself, I run in startup circles where you could put yourself into a TV show with the celebrities. Like, this is getting freaky, but I agree with you. I think there comes a point where you have to step outside of the narratives that somebody wants to sell you in order to live your own life. And it's not just that, because everybody, at least by me, I was raised a good Christian girl, like all of these are all still variations of a narrative that somebody gives you that you're trying to live into versus who you are too. So
yeah, no, I think I completely agree with that, because you said something before which made me sort of think about the dynamics between all of these institutes, and it could be like an investment bank, or it could be Gucci or whatever. But there's basically this sort of the resume thing, that you're 1,000 resumes in and it's not working, right? You're constantly, maybe I should tweak this little bit, maybe I should change the font, maybe I should embolden this particular word, and it's constantly telling you that you're at the wrong end. The system is perfectly fine and you're at the wrong end. So they've basically, it's like the system is very narcissistic, and it's causing you to please the system. Okay, maybe I didn't do this, so I'll do that. And so it's like a trauma bond of sorts, where you're constantly believing. Yeah, please go on.
No, I agree. I actually read about this. I think it's an algorithmic trauma bond to some degree. People
okay.
But I agree with you. I think at a certain point, though, like you decouple yourself from that, because, I call it like ego collapse or something like that, where you're like, oh no, I'm like, so I'm going to say not like snarkily, but like sometimes it's not breaking down, sometimes it's breaking through, where you're like, absolutely not. There is something wrong with this thing, because by any stretch of imagination, I have done more than enough here for this to meet all of these needs. And if that's not working, I really think people forget that people don't serve a system. Systems are created to serve people. And it almost becomes like a problem of a monopoly of a system. Like when you get you start out with a bunch of stores in town, and then eventually a Walmart comes in and you have one store. But after a while, if there's only one store, you've got a problem, because if you can only buy your food from one store, the store can charge whatever they want to charge, because they're the one in charge. The system starts, for me, complex dynamic systems start acting like biological organisms after a while, where like they try to exist and justify their own existence in a strange way, and they needn't do that. People are the system. The system isn't served by the people. The system serves the people. Reverse.
Yeah. No. If we suddenly just stop believing the things about having to work 14 hours a day, then that will go away.
Right.
I agree. Yeah.
It doesn't. You don't actually. We don't have to do that. Like, that actually doesn't have to happen. Like, we could just not do that too,
Yeah, no, completely.
No, it's true. I think that is happening, though. I do think we're in, at least in the U.S., it's subtle, but there is I like the way you said that about the institutions are trying to give you a story. Or I forgot how you said that. It was really true to me. I hadn't heard that said before, but it's like an institutional story. The institutions got to write the narratives in the past, and they're feeling really nervous about being unable to write the narratives as much anymore somehow.
Yeah.
In a strange way.
Yeah. So this sort of reminds me of this very particular scene. Have you seen this movie called Oppenheimer?
I've not, but I want to.
Okay. So spoiler alert. I'm just going to give you a slight spoiler. It won't ruin the movie for you, but
no. I know the story of Oppenheimer. I like him. So.
Yeah, great. So
Oppenheimer. Very interesting person. So keep going.
Yeah. So Oppenheimer is basically, he's sitting in front of the Atomic Energy Board trying to justify his past actions and whatnot. And Roger Robb, there's this character who's basically, who's basically sort of deposing him, and he sort of asks, okay, why did you go to Europe before the Second World War to study new physics? Wasn't that like, don't we have the best theoretical physics department here at Berkeley? And Oppenheimer says, yes, we do have the best theoretical physics department here at Berkeley, but it was only there once I built it. So it's like they've completely detached the story from the person who built that organization, and they've completely given the reins to the organization itself. So it's like the institute has absorbed everything that was competent about Oppenheimer.
So fascinating. I agree with you, though. They do that for some. The more that I study systems like this, systems behave almost like biological things. They justify their own existence in a strange way, and it's complex because it's not like any particular actor, but the way they behave it's weird. But they do that.
Yeah. And then there's this thing which is called the fundamental attribution error in sociology, where you over attribute someone's misgivings to their personality, but under attribute when they make when they do a good deed, you under attribute it to themselves, and you over attribute it to the society. Oh no, you were only able to do that good deed because we as a society were behind you. And that's exactly what's happening with these institutions, right? If someone within the institution did something good, oh yeah, you were able to do it because we were obviously because we were behind you. But when they do something wrong, it's like, yeah, we don't know that guy. So
right. It's so true. Yeah. I mean, that's just a one-off actor kind of thing. But really, what it is the institution itself sort of justifying its own existence, and in a strange way, like it's a biological creature that is trying to stay alive. Even though I think I wrote again. So I write these like systems theory kind of concepts here, but like, if this institution, if you don't require a system, if the actors within a system, like a system isn't like the store and it isn't the customer, it's the relationship between them, and if you don't require the system to watch out for what it's measuring, if you don't review what the system is measuring and what the system is doing, like it's not going to work, because over time that will shift. And the system will start to justify itself as opposed to serving the people. The people will serve the original principle. And that's like that. You can't, that's a bad idea, like it'll go sideways in my brain. Like anyway.
Yeah. No, I think, and that's exactly what's happening right now, isn't it? Because you've got these systems which have installed narratives inside your minds, and we've become like a hive mind where we're giving more importance to the system than to ourselves, and we're like, okay, let's serve the system rather than, okay, how is the system actually helping me? Like, apart from
what's the purpose of this engagement? Like, why does it matter? Like, even the concept of like a resume, like I know that a resume mattered, and I'm not saying don't have a way to signal what you are able to do, but I'm saying we're in the internet age. What exactly are we even looking at here? Like, how easy is it for me to write whatever I feel like writing here? Like, who cares? Like, so I know that I've talked to some people, we're talking about this as well. Like, how do we redesign this for the internet age? Because obviously the concept of a resume is to be able to signal relatively easily your skill sets, what you've done or not done for a group of people. But it doesn't need to be on a piece of paper, like or does it need to be, like we need to think about it. We have to reimagine what this looks like in the internet era, or else why are we don't have to make a resume just because somebody else made a resume in the past 50 years ago. Like, I think it's the same kind of concept of, if you're not re-examining or reviewing what you're doing, you're just starting to worship an old, like, we do things this way because we've always done things this way. Like, that starts to become like a religion, like a little shrine to a thing that's not necessary. I don't know.
No, I completely agree. And I think there is a resistance to sort of question the things that we've been doing so far. For example, I was applying for a job, I think it was about 3-4 years ago, and I was taking the help of like one of my distant relatives, and he was quite old. He's like in his 70s now, and basically I tried to take his help, and the resume making sort of like the ones helping me out with the resume at my uni were like, okay, you have to keep it to max 1 page. You can't go more than, but when I talked to this distant relative of mine, he was like, yeah, no, you have to keep it to like, you have to expand and you have to make like 3 pages and describe everything. And I'm like, okay, so I've got like contradicting sort of signals here, and I don't know which one to listen to, because obviously the distant relative, he would be a veteran in whatever he's doing, and so you've got conflicting advices on what you should do, rather than let me just do whatever I'm doing, and if you like me, come and hire me. It's basically, we've taken away all sorts of agency away from the individual, like as if that one piece of paper represents their entire dimensionality, which is not true. Like all of their dimensions, it's just a 2-dimensional piece of paper, right?
It's true, and it gets back to what you were saying too, is before, it also gets this part of, well, I mean, okay, so they went to X school and they've worked at Y job, but is that all that they can do? Or like, can they do other things too? And like, yeah, you can. The vast majority of jobs can be to some degree taught. And I'm not saying that not saying that anybody should be able to walk into a brain surgery, like that's not it. But your apprenticeship, you're not wrong about that too, outside of what you're talking there. I agree with you. I think that the institutional concept of things are changing so rapidly. And I think the world of work is changing so rapidly, and the way that people are acquiring things are changing so rapidly. This is another problem with institutions. By and of themselves tend to be not as adaptive as humans are. Humans tend to be a lot more adaptive. And in the age of the internet, one asks the question, for me, institutions need to stop being more like towers and start being more like hubs. Yeah. Like places to sift good information through. So one of the ways that libraries, I think, can be useful in this day is you can get information from anywhere, but you can get good information from the library, because you can get any information from the whole world, but you can get good information. So the library doesn't need to be the only place where information exists anymore, but it can be an place where good information exists. And I hope somehow for other types of institutions to do a similar thing, colleges or whatever, because even to some degree you can find a lot of information online on just about anything. But I think that part of this shift, I don't know, and again, I don't know for sure, but societally, institutions are struggling to keep up with the pace of change, but they still feel very entitled to set the narrative somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this good. In the 50s, let's just think of all of the top US universities for a second. I mean, I gave you the example of Berkeley and Oppenheimer, but I'm pretty sure that this would have been the case with all the other universities as well. It's just that initially you've got all these geniuses going to one particular place, one particular set of coordinates in the universe, and all the people start sort of over time start valuing the institution more than the unsung heroes in some senses, because they were the ones who first installed that sense of excellence in that particular place at all. So instead of institutions being hubs where intelligent people consecrated, they became just hubs of sort of stamping everyone. Oh, okay, you're attending this place, so you're good by default. Right,
agree. Like a business suit, they become, instead of being the person underneath the business suit, they're just the business suit. They're the Rolex, but they're not the person wearing it.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that is really true. Especially it becomes an issue when you have because they get really important because they had an Oppenheimer there to set them up. Then they can charge a good salary, but then because they're charging a good salary, then they get some legacy people, a guy who's the son of a millionaire, needs, donates $10,000 or whatever it is, and he gets his special leg in. And then suddenly people who are, and again, it's subtle, but I think over the course of time that can cause a drift. I think when a thing starts, it's a blazingly authentic thing. And titles and status and power and authority, they're sort of like the business suit that covers the thing itself. But the original thing is blazing with like substance, signal, and it gets studied, and they're like, oh, how do we be more like Oppenheimer? Well, we have to wear a suit like him, we have to wear a hat like him, we have to wear whatever like him and study like him. But that's not what Oppenheimer really was, like he was not that. There was a thing underneath all of those things. And sometimes in a performance culture scenario that the internet allows such easy performance, that comes to a sort of extent where you lose sight of the thing, the main thing. I don't know how to describe it. I'm saying thing, but I think it's true anywhere, in that titles are useful because they give you a signal of what someone studied or what they haven't studied. If I'm a doctor of medicine, I've studied medicine, but I've not studied philosophy, I've not studied music maybe or something, But it's not the thing itself, because you can find a great singer at Juilliard and you can find a great singer in a local bar, Both of them can be great singers. Juilliard does not hold, the thing of singers. So there's something underneath, there's something authentic that is unrelated to the titles and the status and the watches and whatever it is. And it's hard to pin down. I don't know. I'm not saying, I get philosophical. I like these kinds of conversations. So sorry.
No, definitely. No. I can definitely see what you were doing there with respect to meaning making, right? So it's what particular aspect of that totem you attach yourself with. Like, is it the clothes? Is it the clothes, or is it his actual philosophy? No, I don't really care about the philosophy. I'm just going to put on a skinny tie suit and like a cowboy right. Sort of hat, and I'm going to look like him. And now I'm like him. So it's these stories, the stories that our mind attaches to certain aspects of people, and that's what I think institutions capitalize on, because they're relying, like let's just say we stopped believing in like one of the big leagues, they disappear. They're only. Oh yeah, this reminds me of a quote from, I think it was from Game of Thrones. That power resides where people think it resides.
It's not wrong though. It's not wrong. That is kind of true. So the question is, how do you, I don't know. I agree. So it's kind of a task for me. I say that my work in the labor markets, it's not really a concept of user reviews. That's not a challenge. Everybody uses user reviews for things, It's not, the system design was part of it, but I discovered, speaking of which, in terms of adaptability, a great and epic failure in online, in the labor market itself, has really opened up, I've never studied economics before. And Claudia, Dr. Golden from Harvard got me over to NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research, and someone from Georgetown sent me over to someone from Harvard, and they helped me with something. I have a skill in economics that I had no idea I had, because, again, not saying it's going to work or anything, but that's not the way people respond when you're saying random things that aren't potentially true. People from Georgetown don't respond to you, and people from Harvard don't respond, and people from MIT don't respond. I write to them, and then I later realized ChatGPT is a jerk, because it told me, oh yeah, this doctor from Berkeley, he'll be great to write for you. And I wrote him, I would like to ask about your paper in the Journal of Human Resources. Would it be possible that what happened is when job seekers went online, in fact, they weren't this wasn't related to wage scarring, it was related to the fact that the labor force became unprotected consumers. And he responded back, interesting, and said, but if you use this again in a paper, and I found out he was a former chief economist at the U.S. Department of Labor that I critiqued, oops, I shouldn't have done that. Actually, that was, no, maybe I shouldn't have, but regardless, people have more than one skill, is what I'm trying to say. People can have more than one skill. and people can learn new things about themselves that they didn't know. But it's a challenge. I lost track of my thought there. I apologize. But can we bring me back to where we were? I think that like people have more than one skill. What were we talking about? Institutions? Sorry, I apologize.
No. So it's all about, what story the institute wants you to buy into. Like it's like, there are 10,000 stories that you can, generate about a particular institution, but which story it's all about image management at the end of the day.
So in the labor market, part of the challenge here is trying to reframe the concept of who you are if you're a job seeker, or who you are. And I think right now the story is you're a supplicant. You're not a stakeholder in the market. You're somebody who, if you're lucky enough, almost like it's a hazing ritual, And I'm trying to reframe the story almost, because to get people to act in the way that I want them to act. So it's almost like I feel like that's part of the work that I do, is reframing a story in a way that will allow people to give themselves a different kind of a story. Instead of the story of I'm a failed job seeker, I'm, an oppressed, I'm, an upper comer. I don't know, whatever. I try different stories here to try to make it, because everybody's different too. Everybody sees it differently. But I know that I've had to reframe my own story as well. And so I don't know. I agree with you. It's about what story you tell yourself, and also what story someone's trying to tell you that you are, and whether or not you're gonna accept to it. So
we've had an interesting, like, an hour and 30 minutes just went by.
Yeah, sorry. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much.
Me too. Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm going to stop recording, but don't just exit yet, because I think the uploading is still going on.